aposematism in amphibians, want to try snakes. How about insects? Because in insects it's a bit different because they're smaller and less likely to evolve hidden signals. So did you think about that?
We did. Insects are a real challenge because, of course, they're hugely diverse. We did think of looking back at the Erebidae and looking within the moths, but we haven't done it because it's a lot of work. The amphibia took many years to classify. We started with the amphibia with 8,000 separate species, but we couldn't get images of the dorsal and ventral sides for the vast majority, and we needed multiple images just to confirm, which is why it went down to 1,100. For looking at these evolutionary transitions, you need a lot of data, and it is a project that we would like to do, but it would be a real challenge to look at insects. Millipedes are another example where there are some examples of hidden signals as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, okay. So I'm just wondering about, thanks for the great talk.
Yes.
I'm just wondering about one aspect of dematic displays.
Yes.
And it was also kind of visible from the examples you used that almost always, very frequently, the prey just leaves it for the very last moment. Sometimes even has to be pushed or touched by the prey before to just show the hidden warning or whatever dematic signal. So
that's a great question, and you can imagine at least two explanations for that, and it's certainly a common phenomenon that you have to go really close, and in fact, as you saw with the lanternfly, you've got to touch it. And one possible explanation is that when it's really cryptic, it's a last-ditch defense. It maybe hasn't, the predator maybe hasn't seen the prey item, so it leaves it till really the last moment. And there is a bit of theoretical modelling by Mark Broom, which suggests that if you're really cryptic, wait until the very last moment before you flee, and it depends on your degree of crypsis. So that's the first explanation. The second explanation is that if you flash and you're some distance away, it's not very scary, and so there'll be a sort of optimal distance there, and I'm sure those two effects could be combined for a sort of scare zone, and my guess is that the math model would probably put it touching or very close to touching. But I think before we do that, we would need more data because most of it is anecdotal for when these startle displays go on. So that's one set of questions. The other one is, how long do you keep your wings open before you close them? Because if you maintain, when we had RoboMoth, we opened them and left them open for the average time that we could find for underwing moths to do so, which is certain fractions of a second. But we don't know what the optima is and whether that varies. You saw with the mountain katydid, it was actually displaying for quite a period of time. So that might vary with ecological circumstance. So yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think there's been much done on it, but it is almost always a last-ditch thing. And if it's too soon, it's not really a startle at all. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll ask a question myself.
Yes.
I'm also skeptical that eye spots are just contrast.
Yes.
But you point to watchful eye, and I couldn't resist.
Yes.
So I remember there was a long time ago a study by Kendiro and colleagues in Newcastle.
I will introduce that just now, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
But then it was kind of controversial, and I stopped following it. So what is the current state of watchful eye?
So let me, I'll give you the very first study of watchful eye, and it's since been repeated, but it is controversial. So this particular study was a really basic study, but it's now been cited, I just checked today, 940 times, so it's been very influential. And it was conducted by Melissa Bateson, but a co-author on the paper was Gilbert Roberts, who I've worked with a lot on the evolution of cooperation. And it involved a tea room. When I put this on and explain to Canadian audiences, they don't know what tea rooms are, but I know you have tea rooms as part of your academic culture. And in Newcastle, because I used to work just south of Newcastle, so I'd been to this tea room lots of times. In this tea room, it was an honesty box, and the honesty box basically allowed people, when they had some money, they would just throw it in, and that would buy the milk and coffee, and it would be self-sustaining, you know, and every time you have something, you just put a little bit of money in. And so what they did over time is they had eyes over the honesty box, and then week 2 they had flowers, and then they alternated like this. So it wasn't replicated, there was only one coffee room, and their output, which is again a bit questionable, they had pounds per litre of milk consumed. So but basically sometimes there were a lot of people and other times there were a few, so you needed a way of looking at that and looking at the traffic. But what they found is that with eye weeks, there was much greater honesty, or in terms of people were prepared to give more when they had this impression that eyes were looking at them. It's fascinating, and it's been used to develop models of what we call indirect reciprocity. Not you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's more, well, I'll help that person, I'll look good for doing it, and so someone else will help me. So that's a rather indirect form of cooperation. It's since, and I just looked at this this morning, it's since been used everywhere. And this is Daniel Nettle, and he did an experiment where he put these posters up in front of, and this was replicated over a variety of areas where people had their bicycles. I don't know about here in Prague, but in Ottawa it's a real problem. We have lots of bicycles stolen. It's very frustrating. Well, anyway, they put up this area here, these things here, and then they had controls where posters had no eyes at all, and this is their data. This is before the intervention and then after, and you'll see that after there's a huge decline when you put the eyes up, and I don't know quite why there's the increase after in the control, but anyway, there's a big difference. And you know, it's not my area of expertise, but I came across the Japanese researchers have been very active on this. They basically put eyes in subway stations and found that when eyes were placed in subway stations, the amount of molestation that got reported was that much less. So, you know, there's been a lot of experiments looking at this watchful eye, and the one that took my attention was this one, where they play experimental games, and this was a dictator game. I won't go into games, but basically it's just how much you want to cooperate by. But for this one, they had this. It was 2 eyes and that. So this to me parallels work on eye spots, because this isn't really eye spots, this is just something conspicuous, but they compared that with that symbol there, and what they found is individuals, when that was looking at them, possibly because this looks like a mouth and 2 eyes, they had greater donations, or you know, greater contributions than that. And there isn't a debate in this field at all whether it's eyes. They all think it's eyes, and yet here the most basic impression of an eye is sufficient in those cases to generate cooperation. And I've seen examples where they put 2 flowers up and they're sort of eye-shaped, but they're not really, and that does the trick too. So just a sensation perhaps of eyes. And it parallels quite nicely the debate over are eye spots truly eye spots when they're conspicuous marks. Well, here we've got conspicuous marks. Why is it controversial? Well, when people have done it, they haven't found it in all contexts. It has been repeated enough for it to be a very believable result. it's quite possible that there is significant habituation going on as well, and people haven't really tested that because they, you know, they go out and do these treatments and look, hey, you know, so if this was everywhere throughout Prague, it might reduce things a little bit, and then eventually, you know, it's like, well, they're just posters. So we will see. Yeah. So that's the watchful eye hypothesis, and I'm staggered by the number of papers that's on it. You know, maybe 1,500 papers, all testing ideas of watchful eyes and so on. So yeah, great question, but nothing to do with eye spots per se, except we've got eyes here. So.
I will also ask about the eye spots.
Yes.
You said that there were studies that claim that it's making them conspicuous against the eye color.
Yes.
It doesn't matter, but how did they explain that in fact most of the species do have something that resembles eye spots, that it's not random spots but it's eyes?
Exactly. How do they explain it? Because they don't. So Martin Stevens is one of the co-authors of that paper where it's conspicuous. I think what they're trying to do is to get people not to be lazy and to say, oh, it could be conspicuous. So they're setting up something. They don't necessarily believe it. When Martin Stevens was commenting on one of the papers by De Bono, he said that that was probably the very best evidence to date that eye spots were really a thing. So yeah, it's like all of these things. We tend to assume it works one way, and then there's someone comes out, or you know, a study comes out and makes you think, okay, well, is it really that? You know, and so it makes people work a bit harder, and so it has a very good effect. There may be cases where it's just a conspicuous signal. So many of the cotocolas don't have anything look like eye spots to me, but they are really brightly coloured, highly contrasting patterns, and they work really well, rather like the crosses on the cattle. And maybe there's just no extra selection for, you know, anything else. I do have a story about cotocola I will mention, and that is early on, Ted Sargent did a lot of work on cotocola, and he realized that habituation would occur very easily to those cotocola, and there were experiments done which show very rapid habituation to robo-moth type things. But what he argued, and it's not been put to the test, is that when you have one species with one particular form, like a red form, and another one with a different form, it's rather different signal, and habituation is reduced when there's a high diversity of startle signals rather than a single one. And he argued the reason why these cotocola are so diverse in their colour patterns is because it makes no sense to be another red signaler when there's loads of other red signalers, and so there's frequency-dependent selection maintaining that high-wing diversity. Never been tested experimentally or across a phylogeny, but it was a nice idea of how you can overcome this clear Achilles heel of those startle signals, and then you just get used to them very quickly.
All right.
I would like to ask you, you also use infrared visual experiments after habituation of the birds to the environment, but could the response of the birds differ if they are in a known environment, if they are in some kind of new environment, maybe?
Yeah, so are you referring to the experimental birds? Yeah. We always have to bear that in mind, and experiments, particularly on domestic chicks, you have to, when you're doing work on neophobia and, you know, eye spots, domestic chicks have been bred to put on weight, and when you get them from chickeries, they, you know, because they've been bred to put on weight, you would expect their neophobia to be that much less, although it is still there. So we have to be very cautious with that. And of course, when we're dealing with wild birds too, the wild birds have got experiences that, you know, we have not control for if they're older, although Alice has done lots of work with rearing, you know, from chicks onwards, which is incredible work. You have to be aware of that background experience, and, you know, they're in a lab environment, you know, clearly there are things going on, but it's the closest we can get to try and understand things, and certainly looking at wild birds like great tits and blue tits is better than looking at domestic chicks which have been bred for ages just to put on weight.
Better but change.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there are no further questions or they can't be expressed publicly, so then finish this part and we can move further to the part. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.